Hello?
Hi. Can you hear me all
Hello?
right?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you see me?
I cannot. I can
There
see.
we
Oh,
go.
now I can. Hey, hi.
I was like, how about you press the button and see what happens? Tell me even more helpful.
Always good. Buttons are always good, except the big red buttons. Don't push those. Nope.
I almost did. I was like, should I be pressing that button? I don't think that's the one I'm supposed to be pressing. Don't press that button. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. It's DC Gomez. Do you go by DC then?
I do.
Awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I want to make sure I'm doing it right.
I understand. You're good.
All right. I think we are just waiting for Bianca, but I think we can get started in a little bit. If she can always join us a little later if we need to. But how are things where you're at?
You know, pretty good. I had an event yesterday and it was fairly warm for East Texas. It was like 90 degrees, so all good. It's back to semi-normal, I hope.
Oh,
How are you
good.
doing?
It's good. We finally have hit spring in the Midwest. From Minnesota, and we have been going through a lot of cold weather, and we're so happy to finally have sunshine. It felt like it was never coming back.
I'm glad. It's pretty much hot in Texas, so yes, this is going to be our day. So yes.
I see Bianca has joined us. Thank you, Bianca. I think we can probably get started if everyone's ready. Thank you all of you who are joining us today. I want to welcome everyone to Word Sleuth's Pass-the-Baton number 26. We are also happy to have you here with us today. And I first want to introduce myself. So my name is Mila Velimirovich. I am the author of Oriana's Legacy, the first in the series of the Crystalla Chronicles. It's available on Amazon, ebook, paperback, or hardcover if anyone is interested. But I am just the interviewer. Who we're really hearing from today is our interviewee, which is DC Gomez, who is a US Today bestselling author. And also with us, joining us, is Bianca Schwartz, who is the author of the Gentleman Spy Mysteries. Thank you both for being here today. And I'm so excited to learn more from you, DC, and all about your connection with Word Sleuth and all the writing that you have been doing. So let's get started by going over what Word Sleuth is. And who we are is a community of writers who are united by a passion for writing and a common challenge, which is word improv. So you're probably wondering, what is word improv? Well, it is a writing challenge where writers create a story using a set of new words. And the story can be broadly defined. So it can be a tale, a poem, a skit. It can be anything that comes into your imagination and you can create and write it down. There is no character minimum or limit. Just whatever you come up with, you create and share with the rest of us. And you can learn more about it and participate at Word Sleuth on Instagram. And I would like to introduce DC Gomez, who is our interviewee of the today. And I'm going to just share the bio that she has. It says, DC Gomez is a fast-talking, extra quirky Dominican with a dark sense of humor. She used to enjoy long walks and all the fun outdoor activities. Unfortunately, due to a mysterious condition, she is now allergic to the sun. Rumor has it that her true nature is coming out and her vampirism is now showing. If you would like to learn more about her or join her at an event, check her out at her website, dcgomez-author.com. We promise she doesn't bite much. And I just want to say I love that bio. That is awesome.
I realized you talking about bios, like my first bio, and I had it on Amazon. I was like, I sound like I should be making math books. I really sound like I should be creating some textbooks because my books are so quirky. And my bio was very like structured. Like, this is where I went to school. This is where I live. It's like, you're gonna buy my books and be like, who is this woman and why is she writing these things? Because it doesn't make sense. So I was like, let's bring more of me into it and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I feel like maybe with my bio, I should sound like I'm like a knight from an old fairy tale or something, because that's what my books are about. I should say, ye old Mila. No, just kidding.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That's true. You know what? New bio. Check.
So much fun. So much fun.
Well, since we are talking about word improv stories, what I would love is for you to share your story with us. And if you could tell us what word improv it's from, that would be awesome.
So let's just say I apologize if I literally mispronounce these, because some of them was like, oh, they're beautiful. I can't pronounce half these words. So I actually ended up picking the challenge number 31, probably because of my personality and some of the words are a little darker than most people would have picked. I love them. So here's what I come up with. Is a really quick flash fiction for anybody. So let's give this a try. The news reporter had been on duty for a week without a break. By the eighth day, her stories were banal and depressing. It felt like the world was vexed with the catonic crimes. All she wanted was a happy story without the frippery of the media. Was that too much to ask? But her 10th day, she had resigned herself that the world was doomed. Her preacher emailed his daily exegesis of the Acts of the Apostle. It appeared even St. Paul was having a rough time this week. Maybe instead of looking for choice stories, she should just settle for some mundane stuff like cooking shows.
Wow. That's awesome. I love it. You're right about quirky.
Everything goes with that part. So yes.
Awesome. Well, I actually just have a few questions about how your story from this word improv came about. So you kind of mentioned it, that you picked it because the words were a little bit darker and things like that. When you created this story, was it like a single word that was like, yes, or did you kind of already have the story in mind and you just built the words into it? I would love to know a little bit more about your process when you created it.
It became more about the words and the story itself. It was very much what called to me at the time. So like I like the combination of a catonic and Vex. Like, what do you come up with catonic? Like, how does this something coming from the underworld? How does this darker part? And how do you talk about like, a whole, summary of the Bible? I'm like, oh my God. It had this whole like hush hush of combinations. So it's like, how can you go and mix these things together into something that makes sense? Because every once in a while, you just don't want to throw the words in there. You want them to make sense into the story. And I'm like, who would have a bad day? Let's be honest. And the person that came up with like, if you're a reporter doing true crime, but you really have the soul passion that you want to see good in the world, these words were perfect. I was like, yeah, let's aim for goodness, even though all you see is, death and destruction.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of why we read some of these books, is that we're just hoping something happy happens, right? Even though just
anywhere
bad, bad, bad. You're like, no, at some point the author has to do something nice, right? Maybe not.
It takes us a while. Sometimes,
the last book on the last page, something nice happens. There we go. Yay, I'm in it.
all comes together. Everybody has that ending. I was like, just have a happy ending. Don't kill everybody off.
Well, yeah, you try. Or you can just bring them back to life. One of them. You figure it out, right?
I do urban fantasy, so it happens all the time.
Yeah, that's the one thing I love about fantasy. You can kill someone off, but you can bring them back in your own fantasy way. Anyway, well, thank you for sharing that with us. I loved it. And thank you for sharing about your process. I would love to know a little bit more about your background. So it says you were born in the Dominican Republic, but you moved back here and then you're now in Texas. I guess my big question is this something that you do professionally? Is this a hobby? Because a lot of us, for me, I wish this could be my real thing, but I do have my main job. But how about you? Is this something that you have actually been able to make into like reality, where this is your full-time gig?
This is one of my two full-time things. So I wish I can say I'm definitely multi-talented in terms of managing my schedule and packing too much. I think that should be a talent when you overextend yourself sometimes, because we do it very well as authors. But I do this full-time as well as a full-time job on the side. So I do lots of traveling. So yesterday I was in Winsboro. So I do lots of traveling with it, and I do commit probably a good 40 hours if you're looking what's a full-time job. So I spend a lot of time creating these stories. So you ask, where I'm at. I grew up in New England, so I grew up in Salem. So the witching world and that part. It's part of my whole entire process. And growing up, it was so natural that I didn't even realize. I was like, wait, that's everybody doesn't have that. Everybody doesn't see the world this way. What?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So do you really, I'm sorry, I have to ask, but do you enjoy Hocus Pocus?
Not as much as most people. I love the idea. So it's fun when you go to Salem and just spend some time in the city because like my parents are still there. So all of my family's still in Salem. So I love it. So as long as it's an accurate description of the city, every once in a while it's like, we technically don't do that, but it happens.
Yeah, that's fair. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota, and so everybody talks about the Fargo movie. I was like, nope, nothing to do with North Dakota at all. That's not anything. So I get it. I totally get it.
You completely understand what's going on. Like, yeah. But thank you. I'm glad you know where we're at. Not the same.
No, not at all. So I guess my other question is, when did you actually start writing?
So I started publishing professionally about 6 years ago. I literally been telling stories, I want to say, for over 20 years. But I think we all have those stories when you finally hit the point in your life, you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm doing it seriously. That was about me. About 6 years, I ran out of excuses. I think that's the reality. It was time to do this or not. And I had a point in my life where everything I was doing was horrible. I hated everything. And I was like, you know what? It's about time to do this. So about 6 years, going on to close the 7. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome that you were able to figure it out and push through it. Because I know a lot of people, when they kind of face that issue, they kind of just keep going down deeper and deeper. And you were able to kind of crawl out of it and do something like that. So that's awesome. That's a great motivator for the rest of us writers who are still trying to crawl out of it, right?
I think once we run out of excuses and figure it out, like, it's not going to get better unless we do something. And following that purpose and that passion that we have, put everything into perspective. Everybody says, like, you're so much happier. I was like, was I that miserable? They're like, well, you weren't happy. I was like, thanks. I'll make a note of that.
That's true. Trying to find that passion and push for it. That's how you need to live your life, right? Or else it's just doing the same old thing all the time.
Every day.
Yeah, exactly. My next question is, what inspires you to write? For me, it's like a mix of everything that I run into, but is it like nature, music, things you watch, things you see? You're talking about a little bit about Salem. What kind of brings these ideas and these stories to your mind?
I think I'm a lot like you. Everything inspires it. What makes a story come together? It's usually like one scene will pop into my head. If it doesn't go away, then I'll commit to it. But if it's something passing, I tend to just spend a lot of time giggling on my own thoughts. I'm like, that would be funny, and let it go. But if it continues to spend some time in my head for a couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, we need to write this down because there's something definitely interesting going on. So that's usually the determination between I like it or I'm going to commit to a whole bunch of stuff with this.
Okay, that's awesome. I was just going to ask, do these scenes pop in your head when you're least expecting it? Or like, when do these, I know I've had a few where I've been like sleeping and I've been like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I have to write this down. Has that ever happened to you?
Usually the best ideas come to you when you can't write them down, like you're driving. You're like, really? This is the time we're going to have this idea in the middle of the road. Yeah. Anytime you're probably very committed to doing something else is when the next idea comes into play. So I usually tell people inspiration is going to find you writing. That's what Picasso says. Yeah, you're going to be working when the next idea comes in and you're like, great, I'm in the middle of this one. Thanks. Now what? That's my world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think inspiration comes when you see like this amazing sunset or when you're on the... you can get inspiration when you're folding laundry. Yes. It can happen anywhere at any time doing the silliest things. And you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So it's good to know that that's kind of everybody. As the driving, where you're like, oh no, like I have to write this down.
I was busy. Can you come back in 20 minutes? Nah, it never works that way.
That's awesome. So I actually noticed when I was looking at your website that you actually do a lot of different stuff, which is extremely impressive. So that you've done urban fantasy, you've done contemporary literature, young adult, children's books, and even devotionals. Out of those, is there one that you enjoy writing more? Is there like a favorite?
Probably urban fantasy because I have a lot more freedom. So dark comedy is still very contemporary. So you still have to deal with it, the parameters of the world. When you're writing fantasy, you have so much more leeway. You get to explore things, you get to touch on things that normally you would never do. So that's usually why I enjoy it a little more. And the rest of it is I think if you can tell me how you feel. If you spend too much time in one universe, you eventually feel like, okay, I need a cleanse. I need a palate cleanse. So hence the reason I jumped to something totally different, just because I tend to get burned out and overwhelmed. And after a while, I was like, okay, if I do this one more time, it's going to get stale.
Yeah, it's always good to take a break and breather from something and clear your mind and do something a little different. So that's really cool. So your children books, they're not full of dark comedy or anything like that?
That's the one series, especially if I'm on a road or in an event, I tend to feel really bad because Charlie's all about positivity and motivating little ones to find they're talented and be good. So I put this like at the corner. Like I feel Charlie should not hang out with the rest of the people because he's a little too perky and nice to be hanging out with my desk intern diary. So I was like, okay, we need to put you over there then. We need to separate you. You can't just be with all these crazy people in this table.
It's true. So I know we've been talking about writing a lot, but I do have a question. What is your favorite one to read? So what genre do you enjoy reading the most?
I usually flip between urban fantasy and actually cozy mysteries.
Oh, okay. Do you kind of use like with the mysteries, do you like to kind of incorporate that into your urban fantasies at times?
I enjoy a little bit of the thriller elements. I like the chase. I like being able to figure out who did it because something has to happen. I think sometimes when we think about fantasy, we forget that fantasy is very broad. Something still has to happen in this fantasy. Like there has to be an adventure, there has to be a chase or a mystery or something. So I like the elements of mystery and thrillers that come with it that I can add into my fantasy. Or else I'm like, what are we doing all day? Like something has to be going on in the stories in the background.
Right. No, that's very true. So I've also been looking at some of the work that you've done. I'm just going to list some of the stuff off. So we have the Intern Diaries, the Cat Lady series, which I love that name. That's awesome. Another World Trilogy, Charlie's Fables, the Dare Collection, the Order's Assassin series, the Elijah Chronicles. I mean, so much different stuff that you've done, and they all sound amazing. And actually, I do want to show, I did order here because it actually looks amazing, this Death's Intern, and I read this, and so I was like, I have to read this because this actually fits very well into what I enjoy reading because I love fantasy. Urban fantasy I'm a little bit iffy on sometimes just because I love going to new worlds, but I do enjoy kind of like saying like, oh, I know what that place is, like that's a real place somewhere. So I enjoy that. I was going to ask you, do you find it difficult sometimes with urban fantasy because it's essentially in your world, and so you kind of have to do a lot of research? So how does that work with like researching and things like that?
I find that, by the way, thank you so much for getting Death's Intern. I hope you have a blast. I love it.
I'm
so
really excited to read it.
So you need to let me know what you think. Like I went totally like, girl, I'm like, ah. All right, so back to the question. You have to be careful. So one of the things when I was writing, actually Death is one of my favorite examples is, I have this whole scene and she's going to go into this building and Isis can talk to ghosts and she can talk to the dead. Well, lo and behold, no spoilers or anything, the building is supposed to be haunted and it's a real building in Texarkana. So I love the building. I've been inside. It's gorgeous. And I'm like, oh, I need to get some Google pictures. And the first thing it says, people died in the 50s and they were burned alive. And I'm like, oh God. Oh God, let's go. Now this entire chapter that was supposed to be semi like action based, now I need to somehow incorporate all this, true crime situations because she talks to the dead. How do you have a situation in a building supposed to be haunted with a girl that works in death and talks to the dead and not mention it? So urban fantasy has that double-edged sword because you have to make sure that whatever building, whatever historical site you're incorporating is still fairly real, or else people are going to come back and call you on it. So I do have a lot of people in Texarkana who kind of going, did you know what else happened in that building? I was like, the book's only this big, guys. Come on, like how much more history can you pack into one book? Like, be nice to me. So yes, research is fun. It also can get you down rabbit holes. So you're like, I've been here for 3 days and got no writing because I've been researching who knows what. So yes, I have to kind of put a limit how much research I'm doing.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So mine is my book is in a fantasy world, but we do fight scenes in it. And so I have to research about like because there's certain ways that I feel like my Google search is kind of scary. Like, how do you stab someone in the appropriate way to make them bleed out? And it's just like, oh no, I'm not actually doing it for real. But no, I understand, because there'll be like moments where I'll be like trying to figure out anatomy and making sure, like, if I stab a person in a certain spot, that's not going to kill them, is it? Or is it going to bleed out? Like, how do I make sure that they live afterwards? And there'll be points where I'll look it up and they'll be like, no, you don't want to stab a person there. They'll die right away. It's like, okay, not there. So I totally get the need for research. My other question is, out of these series that you have, and maybe you can't tell me because, you know, sometimes they're your babies, but is there one that's your favorite or that you enjoyed the most writing?
I probably have a very PC answer, and not on purpose, but one author said it, and I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. It's usually the one that I'm working on the time, because it's the one that's really fresh in my mind. It's the one that I'm immersed the most. So right now I've been playing with The Traitor. So it's part of the Orders of the Assassin series. So I'm very immersed in that. So I'm going, oh my God, and Eric's amazing, and da 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 da. But it's only because it's the one that I'm living at the time. When I'm working on Cat Lady, I feel the same way about Angela and the Silver Hair Gang, and oh my God. So honestly, it really depends on the one that I'm playing with that time that you're going to see me light up and get all giddy, because I've been in the universe for a minute. I've been playing with my characters. When I switch gears, it's the same way about the other. So technically, whatever I'm playing with, not really a favorite. They'll tend to make me smile a lot.
That was a very good answer. Well done. I know that I'd probably be like, well, they're all my babies. I can't choose. But, you know, but I love it. That's a really good answer. Was there one that you struggled with the most, and why did you struggle?
The Cat Lady series is probably the hardest one, because it's the closest. It's contemporary, so it's dark fiction. And we started, and I didn't realize I should have done this. Nobody's actually told me. And she has with some trigger warnings, because this started her contemplating suicide. It's very dark in that nature. It does get funny, because I do lots of dark humor, but she's sitting there, and, you know, her husband has left her for, you know, 22 a pair of double D's. And she's like, really? I put this man through college. I've done all these things. And she's like, all I have left is my reputation. And last time I checked, that doesn't buy milk. What do you do? But coming to terms with the fact that, like, I'm in my 40s, you know, Angela's in her 40s, and you're going through, how do you change your life? You know, I've been through a divorce. So Angela had a lot of pieces of me that I wasn't prepared to actually put out there. And I kind of joke. I was like, if I hadn't done Deb's Intern prior to, I don't think that book would have ever been born. I don't think I would have had enough confidence in myself to put a piece of my soul on paper and then show it to the world before having done ISIS and, you know, Talking Cat and all that mess. So it took me a while to build up to then be able to say, okay, I'm ready to explore this side that's fairly real, fairly raw. I think that's one of the best comments I have ever heard. Everybody goes, I love ISIS, but God, Angela's raw. I was like, pain has a way to open things up. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, well, pain is important. Like, I think we try to shy away from it, but I think it's part of how we grow and we learn. And if we try to leave it behind, then we'll never change and become a better person in the long run. So I like that you're creating a story that can really kind of push those boundaries that need to be pushed, essentially. So that's awesome. I will also like to add, I liked how you said that, you know, you put yourself into it, like this is part of you. And I think a lot of people, even readers and writers, don't really know or understand how important it is to put yourself into your work, like make it part of who you are. And I do it. My husband made fun of me when he was reading. He's like, Oriana sounds very familiar. And I'm like, she's a completely different person. But I will admit there's bits and pieces of me in that character, but I will also admit there's bits and pieces of me in all the characters in my book, like, and not just the good, but the bad. So I have put the bad pieces of me in the characters, because I think what's also great about it is as the book grows, the story grows, it helps me deal with my inner demons as well. So I don't know if that's for you, but that's how I always felt. So.
you have to make them human. And the only way to achieve that humanity is to look at ourselves. You know, we can look at the people and grow from the people, but sometimes when we take those blinders off and decide, okay, what is the good, the bad, and the ugly in us, and truly take those pieces of humanity and put them into these characters, people can make a connection. Even when you're writing dark comedy, there's still something very human about these pieces that we're exploring. And sometimes it's terrifying. Let's be honest. I have a student that said it really well. I don't want to be vulnerable. And I was like, that's a real thing. The problem is your characters have to be vulnerable. Your characters have to be real. And how do you do it unless you bring that humanity to the page? And sometimes we have to be vulnerable.
Yeah, very true. And it's hard to do, but it's something that needs.
Oh God, yes.
100%. Well, I actually have a big question for you, and it might be like a long answer, but I'm totally for it. And FYI, if anyone out there is taking notes in regards to this question, please share them with me because I would like to know. But you are a US Today best-selling author, which is amazing, and I'm super jealous because that's such a great thing to have under your belt. And I guess I just want to know, because I'm a self-published author, and I know there's a lot of self-published authors that are watching this, and traditionally published authors that are watching this that want to know, how did you do it? So what were some of your strategies on how you reach that potential?
So here's the sad part about it is the list is no longer available. So I know. So before we can go, everything I'm going to tell you, nothing's going to apply because starting this January, the USA Today newspaper stopped producing it. So they put an article out there and they said the editor had to stop working, so it hasn't come back. So that's kind of number one, really sad because right now for authors, you could either be USA Today or a New York Times bestseller. So for anybody who's looking to do New York Times, just kind of disclaimer, not saying anything wrong about this, but that's a curator list and most people don't realize that. So unlike the USA Today, that was all about sales. They honestly looked at during a week's period, how much sales any books brought in. So it was legit. Everybody could do it, whether you were indie, whether you're trad, you were literally competing for numbers. And it's been a couple of years. I participated in an anthology before anthologies went super ballistic. And it was probably, can tell you, 9 months of my life that I have never worked as hard as I have done. I don't think I have worked this hard to publish anything else. So we committed a group of authors to literally put it had to be a good piece of work. We literally did all about, I think it was all fantasy oriented, so it's all magical in the essence. And we literally had to sell probably over, I think we sold at least 6,500 copies of this anthology to make it. Because here's the part. Yeah, so where the USA Today bestselling list is it can't be all on Amazon. So if you can have a blowout week in Amazon, it's not going to be enough. So you had to have some in Apple, you have to have some in Kobo. So it had to be a wide distribution, and it's basically all your pre-orders will count. You have to have at least 5,000 sales. And everybody's like, oh, that's not bad. I was like, 5,000 sales just to kind of make sure to hit the minimum because everybody's competing for that week. So you're releasing a book on a Tuesday, you're going to work all the way through that Sunday. The list doesn't come out till like the next Wednesday, which I didn't know. So you spend all week and it's like, is it out? Did we make it? Did we make it? Like, oh, it's on Wednesday. I'm like, oh God, how? So we have seen people do it different ways. We have seen people do it. Anthologies are for charity, and work really hard to all the proceeds for those anthologies to go to charity. You can do any combination. The problem we're having now, which is what that list was amazing for, is they're not doing it. And they haven't come back and said, hey, we're going to pick it up. I've heard some people saying we're going to work for like the Wall Street Journal. Unless you have a nonfiction book, I don't know how well Death's Intern's going to do with like a number one, and they're like, well, nobody's going to take me serious, right? Do you have a book? Do you have like a math book in there? It's the Wall Street Journal. So you have those two right now. But other than that, so yes, the list for the USA Today bestselling stopped in January.
Oh, that's a bummer. I think it's.
Oh yeah.
Those are great ways to kind of like show, like, look at my book. It's a bestseller. Like, it's one way to get your name out there. And so that's a bummer. I wish they would have more of those options. But I do know that there are some like book awards and things like that. Have you ever done any of those? Or
I actually have. So I tend to pick and choose which ones I want to compete every year. So I know Death has won several awards, Plague, which is book 2, as well as War. And it depends on your category and in your genre. So when it comes to it, it's definitely willing to put yourself out there. One of the hardest things about book awards is they'll send you back some feedback. And sometimes you're like, ooh, That's a little brutal. I don't think I want to hear from you again. So it's as long as you're willing to take the feedback. Texas has several book awards as well, like the East Texas Book Festival has a lot of competitions. So it is looking out to see what's available and what makes sense for your genre. So yes, highly recommend it. It's really fun.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. Yeah. I've been looking in book awards too, and I'm kind of a little bit wary because I know I don't know if I want to hear the feedback. I know I
That's
probably
the
need
fun.
it, but yeah, it's one of those things where you're kind of like you got to have tough skin, right? And I don't know if my
I'll tell
skin's
you.
yet. Yeah. uh,
Honestly, you will be surprised how much you're willing to be like, okay, I can take this. It will be okay. It's the same thing as when you're looking for art readers or when you're looking for reviews or you're doing a blog tour. You know, yes, you sign up a blog tour and you have somebody help you coordinate it. But sometimes the things that come back, you're like, ooh, I wasn't ready for that. And you just go with the punches. I'm like, it'll be okay.
right. Uh, so I have a question about kind of your books in general. Where do you sell them? How do you sell them? Do you go to book fairs? So many questions. Again, self-published. So trying to get some notes.
I have been self-published since I started, so I completely understand. And it's a lot easier now than when I started. Trust me. I think when I started 6, 7 years ago, nobody wanted to talk to me. Like I was like that one kid with a book. They're like, "Oh, that's great. Nah, go sit in the corner." So now it's everywhere. I do lots of publicity and podcasts. If you can get a podcast, that's amazing for anybody watching. Face-to-face events, I usually will recommend people to see a much more combination if you can do Comic Cons. I found out comic events that actually have incorporation of different things are great because people are there for different things. So you can get a mix of audiences. Like Comic Cons are amazing because you get the comic community and the writers all together. But you can find all my books on Amazon. I'm getting ready to transition 11 to Wide, so you'll be able to pick them up in Kobo. You can pick them up in Apple. So as I transition how I want to market my books, because being multi-genre makes it a little different to promote than most people. So unlike most people who are just urban fantasy or dark comedy, I have to be a little bit more creative because what works for one doesn't work for the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's all great information. So thank you for that. I'm stealing all of that. My next question isn't so much about the writing, but I saw that you do a podcast called Inside the Mind of Authors. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about it, like how it came about, its purpose, how you can get involved, those kind of things.
That's one of those projects that I had. I think it was right before COVID started. So it kind of became right before it. The idea was very much I wanted another creative outlet. So one of my friends says, have you tried podcasting? And I was like, okay, so you go do some research. What is a podcast? What do you do? And it comes back to what are you interested in doing? So I love books, in case anybody's wondering. Yes, I adore books and I enjoy talking to authors. So I was like, I could do a podcast interviewing authors. I understand the mechanics of writing. I've been doing this for a couple of years. I can do this. Did not expect that almost 3.5 years later, I'm still going to be doing it. I think I have interviewed over 150 authors so far. So yes, it's been a minute. So it's kind of fun. Who would have thought? So I have done about 150 interviews. It is all genre. The goal is, are you passionate about your work? So it starts out with a book reading. So it's Inside the Minds of Authors, available on all podcasting stations. People can check it out. It's also on my website. So every author starts out with a quick reading from their books. So I have realized that the hardest thing for us to do is have a communication about a book if you have no idea what the book's about. So, and I'm interviewing people all the time. So they're like, are you going to read the book? I was like, I would love to. I don't have enough time to read, and I'm not as fast of a reader as I wish I was. So I couldn't read 4 books in a week. I wish I could. I'm not that kid. So what we started doing is having the authors read it. So the viewers, as well as myself, know, what are we talking about? You get a piece of this book, and you can find yourself falling in love with the story very quickly. So it has become really, really fun. How do you get involved? You can check out my website and kind of send me a note. It gives you some details. Let's just kind of follow along. So we're always looking for comments from our viewers, seeing what they think, what they enjoy. They guess are super fun. So it's been a fun journey.
So yeah, I love that. I love authors helping authors because I think that's what we should be doing. I think that's the one great thing kind of about our group is that we're not trying to like fight for the limelight as it is. We're all trying to boost each other up and share our work because we all want us to be successful. Because if we're all successful, then it's even better because more people are reading. Right? And I think that's a big thing. We want readers. And I hear people say, like, I don't read. And I'm like, you do read. You just haven't found the right thing yet. And I think that's what's great about authors working together, is that we can kind of show, like, this might be the book for you. Check this out. So I love that you do that. That's awesome. So thank you for that.
I totally agree with you. I heard somebody said that we were competing. I was like, I would never write enough books to keep one reader fed. I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. Some people read a book a day. So even if you become the rapid writer in the world, you're not going to do it. So while we might be competing for eyeball space on Amazon because there's a million books all the time, you're not competing with other authors. You know, the more we can share with each other, the more we can literally kind of express who we are, it tends to make the market a lot easier. Also, the fact, I have a newsletter and I feature authors all the time. It's like, hey, go check so-and-so out. Why? Because I might not be writing a book this, the next 6 months. But people that do. So your readers will trust you. Your readers are going to follow. And if you can promote another author, it's amazing for the universe. You pass a whole bunch of love around.
Yeah, that's totally true. That's awesome. And I know that when it comes to, I'm an avid reader, and I love when people, especially on Instagram or other authors, share, these are books that I really enjoy, and I'm like, well, I'll probably enjoy them too. And so then I try to find them and I try to read them myself, because it's not only that I just like to read, but they're also really helpful when it comes to trying to help the creative process. So it gives me better ideas, helps me figure out better conversational styles. It just helps me grow as a writer when you're able to read all this different what's all out there, essentially. So, and yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of adventure I'm gonna get into the intern.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to add it to my library. I do not have as nice of a library as you do, because I need a bookshelf. Right now, my bookshelf is my windowsill. So I need to get it.
I am guilty because my TBR is everywhere. So my boyfriend asked if that was my new love of decorations. It's just books sprinkled around through the house. I was like, shh, don't tell anybody. So yeah,
Hey.
While everything looks really nice, the rest of the house is covered with books. I'm a book addict. I cannot even lie. I was like, oh my God, pretty cover. I should get this book. And then I'm like, I have about 75 books that I should be reading. I was like, I'll get to it. I figure buying books and reading books are two separate hobbies. I should master both of them really well.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. Just add it to your list, TBR list, right? It just keeps growing. I've seen it.
It'll be
fun. Those pretty covers, they get you every time, don't they?
I'm guilty.
As am I. I love them too. Well, I guess that's all the questions I have, but I want to see if anyone else has any questions. Bianca, I know you're there. Do you want to ask any questions of DC while you're here?
Hi.
Hello.
It's you. I kind of totally relate to the there's a little darkness in everything situation. Somebody read one of my books once and said, "Oh God, Bianca, you're a dark little thing." I was looking at listening to the whole thing that you have so many genres, and I was wondering how you manage not collapsing the genres, because one of my big thing is that I'm historical romance, but I have a list of trigger warnings at the beginning, because if you like your romance clean and nice, don't read my books. Just don't. To me, it's not a book unless somebody had sex and somebody died violently.
I like that.
So it really, my books are not, they're thriller, they're mystery, they're historical romance, and they're also researched in a way so you could call them historical fiction if you really wanted to. But I'm not even doing that. So how do you keep it completely? One is fantasy, the other one sounded like humorous, dark humor, contemporary. How do you
What I figured out to do that is easiest for me, and everybody has a different technique. So I have a urban fantasy, which is all my fantasy universe. So I created what is called the Reaper's World. So anything that's going to have magic is going to take place there, period. Whether I'm participating in an anthology, whether that piece is going to have a thriller element. So the entire umbrella is going to fall under urban fantasy, or that part, and that's going to be there. Anything without it is going to be very contemporary. So that's kind of my hard line. I always find that every single genre has subgenres underneath. I don't think you can have one without it. So everybody who kind of wants to have one clean, I think that's very hard to keep, because you're going to find, like, my contemporary book 2 has a mystery, like has a murder. So, I can say it's a little bit of cozy mystery. Well, it has an underground lifestyle of, sex and drugs in there. So what are you putting in? So we stick with, like, is a dark humor, period. There's other elements in there. Good luck. You're going to have an adventure, a bunch of shenanigans, and it's going to be there. But my usually division is whether it has magic or not, and that's kind of the separation. And then the children's books are totally different. So that's just a whole different playground. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm really shying away from children's books because my grown-up books are so definitely grown up. I'm like, I don't want to confuse people.
One of the things I realized, so like the brand for DC that kind of keeps everything fairly okay, is you're going to find it that it's fairly clean. My sex scenes are going to fade to black. It's going to have lots of actions. There's not going to be a lot of cursing, and there's not going to be very explicit. Like, the gore is not going to be there. So it's going to be lots of adventure. So overall, and quirky characters, period. So I was pretty okay keeping it all within the same pen name. I also realized I don't have the mental capacity to have multiple pen names. So people that do are my heroes. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how you handle it. I can barely handle my Facebook and Instagram with one pen name. If I added anything else, I'm like, I'm not going to survive. So it was one of those really strategic decisions in terms, can you do this and can you maintain it? I have friends that have multiple, and I'm like, an odd, because I can't. I was like, I don't know how. When do you sleep? Like, I wonder when they eat. Like, do you go to bed? Because I can't handle my own world with one. You got like 3. I don't know how that happens.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't even use a pen name. I use my own name because I'm like,
it's like too many passwords.
Yeah,
no.
built up before. I'm not leaving that behind. I'm sorry, but it was too hard. So. Yeah, I'm actually traditionally published, so the self-publishing really, I'm totally in awe of people who have self-published, because how do you do everything, all the steps, and then do all the marketing yourself as well? I mean, blows my mind.
Nobody tells you that you're going to have a small business. I think that's the part that I didn't realize when I signed up. Nobody told me that it was going to be me, myself, and I running this small little enterprise 24/7. What I learned after years of struggling is that I can't do it all. So I have no issues hiring editors now. I have no issues hiring cover designers. I hire formatters. I have a PA so she can help me do posting on Facebook, because at the end of the day, I had to decide what is the only thing I can do myself. Like, the only thing that nobody can do for me is write the books, period. Everything else can be outsourced. So it got to the point, I was like, do I want to have a life? Does my family want to see me? Do I want to sleep? Do I want to go out in public? Do I want to be an adult? And still be able to create. So my recommendation for everybody, whether you are self-published or traditional, is pick the one thing that you are the only person that can do. And if you can outsource everything else, start outsourcing. Because if not, this becomes a really, really painful job. And you start regretting it and resenting it.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice, because, whether you're self-published or traditionally published, you shouldn't stop doing something because there's all these things. Like, if you are really passionate at writing and that's something you feel really close to, you should keep doing it. Someone out there wants to read your work, and so you shouldn't be like, well, I can't market, or I can't edit. Or my big thing is, so my family were immigrants from Eastern Europe, and so my grammar is a hot mess. I think it's just terrible. And I knew that if someone were just to read my book that I just put together, no one would understand it. So I had to go with an editor. And so, finding those things is like, what can you afford to send to somebody else so that you're not overwhelmed is extremely important, because we want to read your books. Everybody does. We want to see what's out there. We don't want to miss out on a story just because, you know, you weren't good at doing contractions or whatever. I don't know.
I totally relate with you. That is just find an editor. Be okay. Granted, at the beginning, it's hard to give your work to anybody, and I'm pretty sure being traditionally published is the same. Like, you guys go through a brutal, editing process. You know, we tend to be
the one thing that you really get out of traditionally publishing. You get the cover, you get the editing, and the editing is like, it smooths it out. I mean, there's story editing, there's line editing, I'm actually in the middle of doing my galley read. Where it's formatted already, and that's when you read it the last time, and I still find things where I'm like, oh, I used that word like 5 lines above, so I'm gonna change that. That's the point where you actually really see what the reader will see. So the editing is fantastic. My covers are beautiful. I actually have lots of input in what the editor of the publishing company, Central Avenue, puts on the covers. She's very, very good at getting my input, and I actually get to do a lot of it. But I have no idea how to get it on NetGalley. I don't have no idea how to get my books submitted to prizes and things like that. I can research it, but half the time they won't even take it unless it's traditionally published. So it has to be done through your editor, and all those kind of things. I mean, I'm going to bookstores and I'm introducing myself and I'm saying, hey, do you have my book? And I'll come and sign it if you do it. I do a lot of those things, and it's so much work. And I really hear you. I do a full-time job writing, and then I have a day job, and then I have a family, and then I have a 19-year-old who refused to go to college. It's a full life.
It's a full life, and sometimes that life is what makes our books amazing, because you have to pull from life. But sometimes I think we can be very overwhelmed. Like, writing can be very, very lonely. Because, come on, like, who wants to hang out with us when we're typing? It's not really exciting. It's not the sexiest job in the world. Nobody, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with a writer as they type. Unless you're another writer. That's not fun. Nobody wants to do that with us. So understanding that and being comfortable with the fact that, we need a community, especially if you're indie. You need a community of people that can guide you in the right direction and tell you, hey, this is the people that can definitely help. But it is a full-time job, and it's okay to ask for help. I think that was the hardest thing for me to really realize, like, okay, where can I find help? Where can I get somebody? How can we do all of this? Because, I have huge world domination plans. I'm like, we need to be doing all this other stuff. And everybody's like, when are you going to sleep? I was like, oh, yeah, I got to do that too. So let's back that up.
I have one, if it didn't fall out of my brain. I had one last question. How do you, how do you, when did you decide that you could actually do this full time and make enough money to do it? Did you just decide it beforehand and have some money set aside for a specific period, or did you make a certain amount of money and say, okay, well, this could be bigger?
I ended up having to set aside money before I could start. I'm very cautious. I don't know if anybody else is, like, the whole, like, phobic. I'm very restricted. Like, I needed to have a backup plan. So before I decided to jump into it, I literally had to set money aside and be able to say, okay, let me get myself mentally prepared, because it's a huge leap, and be able to say, how am I going to prepare, and how am I going to be able to afford writing these books? Because it is still me putting it all out there before it gets paid back. So yes, it was much more a prepping work than it was, hey, let's jump out there and see if it makes it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not that brave. If anybody else is, more power. It takes me a little longer. So yeah.
I totally get that, because I'm the breadwinner, so I can't get a job yet. Definitely not. So it took you six years to get it. How long did it take you to get to actually be able to make enough money to not have to go in your savings all the time?
took me about 3 to 4 years. It took a while to actually build that whole entire world. So yes.
That's, but kudos to you. I'm in awe.
Every once in a while, you still have to question. You're like, oh, we should really question this master plan. But yes, it's amazing and it's fun, but it's a lot of pressure that comes with it.
Right.
So yes.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I'm about to publish the fourth book, the last in this series, and working on the second book, the second series right now. So I'm hoping that bit by bit, book by book, I'm getting closer to where I can give up the day job. So it's kind of between. I mean, you're always writing. There's just no, because if you're a writer, that's what you do. You can't not do it. I mean, it's my happy place. If I don't write, I become very crabby and not somebody anybody wants to live with. So I've been writing either for film or later for books for a long time. But I have not earned enough money to pay the rent ever. With my writing. So I'm really, it's an amazing thing to be able to do that. And so you said you travel a lot, so you go from town to town, to bookstore and actually have appearances?
I actually do conventions. I do more conventions than bookstores. It depends on one of the things I'm doing next year specifically. This year I have about an event a month. Next year, I'm planning to cut it back and figure out which ones are actually going to give you the best return on my investment. Mm-hmm. So one of my goals is, where do you find more readers? Where are you going to find that connection? So I'm doing little ones as well as big festivals and see how that goes. But next year, we're going to be cutting back to a much more, which ones are the target ones that we want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure out what would be a good one to invest into. I just did the Festival of Books in LA and the LA Times Festival of Books, and it was a huge event, but it's all genres, bookstores, everything is there. It's just a festival of books, and I'm kind of thinking maybe it would be better to find a targeted in my genre kind of bookstore, event. But how do you find events? How do you look for them?
So here's what I found out after doing many of these is that if you want an event that has a different drawing, and I think that was kind of the conversation I had with another author, is a book-only event, unless you are in a really good city that is dedicated for reading, doesn't usually bring a lot because there's too many of us in that event. You're going to find too many authors and not enough readers. And every reader that shows up is not going to buy from every author. Mm-hmm. So you can have literally 300 readers come in. But if you have 50 authors, is everybody going to make their money back? Depending on the event, you're paying for a table. Are you going to make enough to pay for the table? And if you have to travel. So usually if you can have an event, believe it or not, like we're talking about wine festivals. So Texas is into, we're wine festival campaign. So they do lots of wine events, a beer festival. Events like that, believe it or not, are great. People are there. They're going to come for other things. And once they start walking around, you'd be surprised how many books you book. So you become much more creative on how you're going to find the event. And it's trying to find an event that is going to get the most foot traffic as possible. So I have done we do Comic Palooza here in Texas. And it is literally like a Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. Most authors never think about doing a Comic-Con because, who's going to be there? You have foot traffic. A lot of people are going to be readers. So you're trying to give yourself a diverse group of people that is going to be walking around for that event, not just the book event. It's just it seems to be very hard to get a lot of shoppers into an event that's just books, unless you have something else.
I totally get that because, the Festival of Books was full of people who read, obviously, but and it was packed. But
But they were there. They were there to find their favorite author. I think that's the catch, Right. So most people who are going to these big events are there for 2 to 3 authors, and they're going to spend their money on that, and they might be able to spread out because the more authors you have, it's like a kid in a candy store. Where do you pick? What do you have? It's but you want to have it all, and then you run out of money because you pick your top 5, and then everybody else So it depends. So yeah, so those events, the bigger they are, the more people you're going to have, which is amazing. The bigger the drawing, but if there's too many authors, it's hard for every author to make their money back. It's just going to be very hard to get enough readers who are going to be able to go around to everybody and buy a book from everybody.
Right. Totally makes sense. Now I just have to figure out which romance reader will go drink what.
That's the
Wine
catch.
and beer. Wine and beer. Then you got both, right?
Yeah.
Actually, romance readers will drink it, so you might want to go check them out.
I love that. Thanks for the information about like all the different conventions, because like I think my mind would just go to find a book fair, right? Find a book, but then it is going to those different festivals, different conventions, the Comic-Cons, all those. That would be so helpful because people are be like, oh, sweet, a cool book, and plus I'm drunk, so I don't know that I shouldn't not buy this book. You know, right? Take advantage.
You'd be surprised how many books she would sell. I had an amazing friend who we sat together yesterday. He's like, I sold out at a wine festival. He's like, the first hour and a half, nobody was there because they were drinking wine. Afterward, he's like, I was the best-selling author in the room. Everybody was buying a book. I was like, that's a good call. And the same thing when you go to a Comic-Con. If the Comic-Con, for whatever reason, only has print, you know what I mean? They only have beautiful print pictures and everything else. If you happen to be one of the two authors, there are people like, oh, God, there's a book here. I might need this. So you just always might be surprised. And you said something about your genre. I have done, believe it or not, really well at a romance festival, and I don't write romance because I'm the odd one out. So like usually the husband who stopped by my desk is like, you don't look like you write romance. I'm like, I don't. He's like, I think I might need your book. I was like, sounds like a plan. I am here. So when you're looking at it, especially when you're starting out, find events that are not that costly because tables are very expensive, but also just experiment outside on the wild, and you might be surprised. I'm like, really? This event might be the one for me? And one of the good things about it is that I found out is live events are amazing for finding your super fans. Like people that I have met at my live conventions have become readers. Like they have bought the books in different formats. They have called me. They have sent me stuff. Like I've had readers in Houston that every time I'm there, like they come and visit me. They're like, okay, what do you have new? I was like, nothing. You have it all. Like, it's like, well, I need a T-shirt. I was like, let's do this then. Like, this is what it's for. So it's great for us to get really good connection.
Okay. That's good info. Really good info. Thank you. I'm glad I asked.
I think we're all glad you asked. Okay, thank you. All right, well, I think we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to close out by thanking our interviewee, DC Gomez, for joining us today, and also thank you, Bianca, for joining us as well. And I believe, DC, you will be the interviewer in the Pass-the-Baton coming very soon, so we're excited to see you again and see a new author who can share more cool stuff, and I'll definitely be watching, see what else we could hear from. And then I also want to invite people, if you're interested in this writing community and if you're interested in learning new different words, to join us at @WordSleuth on Instagram. And also a big part of getting noticed on Instagram and any social media is your followers. So if you want to get to know more about us, please support us by following us. My tag is @authormila V. DC, I believe yours is @dc.gomez. Correct me if I'm wrong. And
right.
Then Bianca, you're @SchwartzBianca1. Is that correct?
Yep.
Awesome. So if you want to learn more about any of us, and even if you just want to see what cool stuff we're putting on Instagram, feel free to join us and be followers. I know that I'm following both of you, and I've already seen a lot of cool stuff already. So, but thank you for everyone, and I think that's it for Pass the Baton. So
thank you, DC.
Thank you, ladies. You guys are amazing. I'm so excited. It's an amazing time. Thank you.
I'm glad. It's always nice to talk to a new author. It's a new to you author. I'll have to go and check out the dark that comedy, Woman in Distress. That's silver-haired lady or whatever it was. I have to check that out.
I think we all need to
Thank you,
check that
Cynthia.
out, I'll be honest. I think we all need it.
Thank you, ladies. Have an amazing day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.